Today, we're diving right into a structural breakdown of a seriously profound theological text, Romans chapter 5. It presents this totally fascinating premise. What if absolutely all of human history was fundamentally shaped by just two men? We're going to look at how the text argues that these two figures each brought a distinct spiritual contract or covenant into the world, and how that literally impacted the fate of all humanity.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the breakdown. First, we'll look at the two men and two covenants. Second, Adam's legacy of sin. Third, Jesus as the second Adam. Fourth, we'll compare these two contracts side by side. And finally, living in a new identity.
Section 1. Two men, two covenants. The foundation here is all about human representation. To really understand the first contract, the text in Romans 5:12 gives us the setup. It reads, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin." Now, in biblical history, that one man is identified as Adam. According to the text, it was his specific act of disobedience back in the Garden of Eden that originally introduced sin to humanity.
Now you might be wondering, why does one single person's action matter so much to the rest of us? Well, to grasp that, the text frames Adam as the head of the human race. He wasn't just acting as an isolated guy. He was a representative. His failure had this massive ripple effect, basically transferring a sinful nature to all of humanity.
Which brings us to Section 2, Adam's legacy of sin, the broken contract.
What's really interesting here is how the source systematically categorizes the fallout from this broken contract into three really severe layers. First up, spiritual death. Second, physical death. And third, total separation from God. The argument is that because of this single failure, all humans were inherently born into a covenant of bondage.
But here is exactly where the narrative pivots. Section 3. Jesus, the second Adam, reversing the curse. The text in Romans 5:19 captures this incredible symmetry perfectly. It says, "For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous." It's this direct, powerful parallel of two actions, right? The first Adam failed through disobedience in a garden. The second Adam succeeded through ultimate obedience on a cross.
Moving on to Section 4, comparing the two contracts.
And this brilliantly illustrates what you might call the ultimate spiritual repair job. If you look at Jesus' contract, it systematically reverses the exact damage of the first one. Under Adam's contract, you've got sin, condemnation, death, and separation. But flip that over, and under Jesus' contract, you get grace, forgiveness, righteousness, and eternal life. The source argues that while Adam transferred a fallen nature, Jesus transfers divine righteousness.
Diving a bit deeper into Romans 5:18, the text points out a massive contrast in the internal human experience. Think about it. Condemnation through Adam results in guilt, shame, fear, and spiritual death. Conversely, justification through Christ offers peace with God, salvation, freedom, and eternal life. The central argument being made here is that no matter how deep the sin went, the grace presented is infinitely greater.
This leads us directly to our final takeaway. Section 5. Living in a new identity. Switching allegiances. Let's see how this builds into practical application. The text outlines the concept of two completely distinct spiritual families. Step 1, every human is born into Adam's family, inheriting sin and death. But step 2 is the huge turning point. Receiving Christ is the solution, and then step 3 is the result of that choice, a total spiritual transfer into God's family, which means grace and life. Salvation is basically framed as this active, legal transfer between the two.
For those who make this transfer, the takeaways are incredibly practical. The text emphasizes that human effort alone absolutely cannot erase Adam's fallen nature. Only this new covenant can do that. Therefore, believers who step into this new identity experience three massive shifts. They are no longer condemned, they are totally forgiven, and they are made spiritually alive. So the crucial point is, how does the text say this theology is applied every single day? Well, it provides a highly specific 6-point framework for prayer to do just that. It goes like this. First, thanking Jesus for his sacrifice. Second, asking for deliverance from Adam's fall. Third, praying for Christ's righteousness to actively work in you. Fourth, asking for daily obedience. Fifth, letting grace absolutely reign above failure or sin. And finally, giving thanks for becoming a totally new creation. To wrap up this explainer, the source leaves us with an ultimate provocative challenge. After completely breaking down the historical impacts of these two representatives, Adam's bondage versus Jesus' new covenant of life, it all boils down to one direct question. Which covenant are you living under today? It's a remarkably powerful framework that really leaves you to deeply ponder your own spiritual identity.